Guys. Hey guys, so I know it's been quite a while since I did my last Q&A, but here we are. I'll get to your questions in a minute. Before that, a couple of weeks ago I released a video announcing that this November I will be heading to Okinawa in Japan to film a series on the origins of karate. And so in that video I said that I want to make this series like really high quality. I want to up the production value. So I'm giving myself a budget of $10,000 and I said that, I'm trying to raise the funds towards that. So just give you a little bit of an update on that. I'm kind of almost halfway there. I've reached about $4,000 that I've raised so far. So still quite a bit to go, but that is really amazing. I decided not to do like a GoFundMe or anything. I thought it would be better to do this organically by getting you guys to support the online store, MONKEYSTEALSPEACH. I know a lot of you have been really enjoying the Kung Fu pants. Got such good feedback from those. Not just because they're really great to train in, but also just for lounging around at home. They're so comfy. So you can grab those there. Also the lidded cup, or the gaiwan with the white crane emblem on it, has been very popular. A lot of people have been grabbing those to enjoy their Chinese tea with, and a lot of people have been asking about them too, so you can also get those on the store. Another way that you can support the project, if you want to do so a little bit more directly, is through patreon.com/MONKEYSTEALSPEACH. All of that money then goes directly to me with no overheads or anything. And from Patreon you can get access to all kinds of exclusive unseen content from my previous trips, as well as some like other videos. I do some tutorials or some explanations of stuff, or some little kind of behind the scenes like talks about things I experienced off camera on my trips. So there's loads of content on there that you can get. And some of you have also been reaching out to me and just like asking for my PayPal to donate directly, which is like a really big help, and I appreciate that so much. So if you want to do that, I'll also leave my PayPal details in the description to this video. So yeah, let's get into the questions. Alright, so the first question on YouTube was from the Blue Wizard of West Virginia, who has said, I used to practice Wing Chun and it was my passion, but life beat me up a couple of years ago and now I feel unworthy of Kung Fu. How do I change that mindset? Well, first of all, I just want to say, please never ever feel unworthy of martial arts. The whole purpose, or I suppose not purpose, but the greatest thing that you can get from martial arts is a sense of self-worth, is that self-improvement. And it's been one of the greatest things that I've got from martial arts myself. Is, I've been through some tough times in the past, some really dark places, and like my martial art practice is one of the big things that kept me going. It's always been a constant in kind of an ever-changing world that's out of your control. It's always been the one thing I've been able to grasp onto, and like no matter what's happening around me, no matter what's happening in my life, like I've always been able to just come to my practice, whether that's the interactions with other people through drilling and sparring and doing sticky hands and different kinds of like partner stuff, or whether it's just that, taking that time alone, just being in your own head under the stars at night in the park, like going through your forms, just that kind of space to yourself. It's always been something that's always been with me. As far as like a sense of feeling unworthy, I think that like we all get imposter syndrome. I think that's kind of just a natural part of human nature. And so if you're feeling that, I feel like there's a good chance that there is a lot of other people you're training with that are probably also feeling that, like in your school. I think sometimes the tendency is as well, like, there are some people that kind of try and be overconfident and cocky and always trying to convince you that they know more than you, or that, trying to put you down. That to me reflects more on them and their own insecurities than it does on like your own sense of worth. I know it's very easy to see these kind of people and start to think, oh well, they obviously are better than me or know more, but yeah, just remember that everyone's dealing with their own demons, and they're probably you know, trying to compensate for some stuff that's going on in their own life too. So yeah, please never ever feel unworthy. Martial arts is not about being amazing. It's about always trying to be better than you were the day before. It's a constant path of improvement. It's a constant process. And we're all, honestly, we're all unworthy, and we are just really doing our best. So please never have that mindset, and I hope that that can help. Okay, so the next question, Wingman Original has asked, how can Chinese Kung Fu counter grapplers or other opponents with knives and guns? Should I learn Krav Maga or BJJ to be a more complete martial artist? I mean, honestly, I feel like if the purpose of your martial art is to deal with people with knives and guns, you're putting yourself in unnecessary danger. I mean, it's like sometimes no knowledge is safer than a little knowledge, because, you know, if you're training these things kind of half-heartedly and then someone actually does pull a gun on you and you try and do some like fancy disarm thing, you end up getting shot. That's not really very good. So I don't think that sort of mindset is really one that's particularly healthy to have in martial arts. If you are living in an environment where, you know, knives and guns are a constant threat, then I think there's probably other things you can do other than martial arts to try to address that issue. But as far as like learning Krav Maga or BJJ, honestly, I think just learning the more different things, the better. Everything gives you a different perspective and has a different kind of emphasis and focus on training. I got my blue belt in BJJ at the start of this year, and it's something that I've enjoyed hugely, and it's given me a very different perspective of martial arts. Okay, so next question from Chris Pope. He said, hello, I'm a new subscriber and love the content. I've been practicing martial arts for about 20 years, mostly karate, and there is a serious lack of representation when it comes to Chinese martial arts available in my area. I recently started training with an 8-step praying mantis group, and they emphatically claim to be the sole inheritors of this style from Wei Xiao Tang. Some of my research leads me to believe this is impossible, since there are others teaching 8-step in Taiwan currently. What, if anything, do you know about this controversy, and should I care? I really only care about the legitimacy of the art I'm learning and not being duped or grifted, because I can't confirm the claims. I mean, look, I don't really want to get into the politics of it. Politics is really one of the worst things with martial arts. It's really just a deep poison that plagues traditional martial art practice, and I despise it. I'm not going to mention any names, or I'm not going to, you know, say who's right or wrong, but honestly, I mean, 8-step Mantis is pretty popular in Taiwan. There are a lot of people practicing it. From my understanding, Wei Xiao Tang was teaching quite openly and had quite a lot of serious students in Taiwan. So I don't believe there is any one sole inheritor. And I think, honestly, just the quality of teaching and the quality of practice should speak more than any sorts of claims like that. So hopefully that helps. Okay, next question is from Shokan Kin Curler. If you could dedicate yourself to another style and teacher, which one would you choose? And maybe a little bit of the why behind that decision. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So I mentioned that I got my blue belt in BJJ at the start of the year. More recently, I've been practicing the Filipino martial art, Calis Illustrissimo, and I'm really, really enjoying that. It complements my Mantis Kung Fu really, really well. It has a lot of crossover, but also some great differences, and I really like the drilling and the emphasis on distancing, and with a weapon. It's very, very different to what I'm used to. So yeah, really, really enjoying that. But I assume your question is going to be aimed at like Chinese arts. So I would say, I think someone actually did ask me this question before, that if there was another style, I'd probably learn maybe BujinTV. I just think that's a really great system. I like the way they move. I like the way they generate power. I think it fits. It's quite similar to my Taiji Mantis in terms of overall sort of approach. other than that, like I learnt 心理六合拳 for a short while in Shanghai. I just trained some basics, but I trained with a few different teachers. And I really, actually really love that style. It's just unfortunately, there was quite a bit of politics there. There was kind of some issues I didn't really like about some of those teachers. I won't name names or go into that, but still, as a system, I think it's a really great system. It's really well structured. There's only one form. Most of the training is done through solo line drills. And I think it's a very efficient way of developing body mechanics and power. So I would really like to explore that deeper and go further into it. But at the moment, I'm kind of happy with the other stuff that I'm doing. So that's all the questions from YouTube. Now moving over to Instagram. Kung Fu Academy Castle Hill has asked, how useful do you find Shuai Jiao is in understanding applications of traditional Chinese martial arts? Shuai Jiao, if you're not familiar with it, is Chinese wrestling. It's quite similar to judo in many ways, although kind of different rules. I think it's fantastic. It's really, really good. It's a great way to, I think, understand the more grappling kind of side of Chinese martial arts, which is something that is not always emphasized as much as it should be. That said, there's kind of a counter trend emerging recently where I feel like there are people that are kind of overly obsessing with grappling and Chinese martial arts, and they're kind of, insistent that, well, this punch is not actually a punch, it's actually some kind of throw or takedown. This kick is not actually a kick, it's some kind of sweep. Sometimes they're right. There are a lot of throws and takedowns in Chinese martial arts, but sometimes I think people try and look too hard for something more obscure. So there is a balance that you need to strike, I think, when looking at like Chinese Shuai Jiao versus Chinese Kung Fu. And it's also important to remember here as well that while they have mutually influenced each other, and there is a lot of Shuai Jiao grappling aspects to Chinese martial arts, they are at the same time different. Okay, Toke Shujim has asked, what is one misunderstanding about Chinese martial arts that you would like to dispel if you could? Well, I think maybe that Shuai Jiao Chinese wrestling one is a pretty good one. I already went into that. I think other than that, I think with misunderstandings, maybe one that comes to mind is kind of people tend to overly stylize their styles, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is that a lot of people think that when you're applying your art through sparring, fighting, whatever, they think that it has to look like the art. Whereas the thing that we're really trying to do is allow the underlying principles or the body mechanics to arise naturally. And so when you're fighting, it's not necessarily going to look like when you're doing the forms. I mean, there will still be some, I suppose, characteristic strategies. For example, in Mantis, we have a very big focus on entering with fast combinations of strikes that are also using a lot of trapping, and then moving in and trying to get a takedown and ending it with a takedown or some kind of other finishing move. And so that would be quite apparent. Or like Baji-chan would be focused on these very big kind of powerful, explosive movements. Southern styles tend to be more conservative. Fujian styles tend to be more conservative in the way they move, things like that. I think that kind of thing you are going to see, but you're not going to see someone in Bagua, they're not going to be walking around you in a circle doing this. In Mantis, we're not going to be facing off like this and constantly using hooks and stuff to grapple and grab your hands and strike and things. It's not going to be so apparent. And people also, on that same tangent, people tend to kind of think, does this style have this move? And it's almost like, oh, well, you know, Mantis doesn't have a roundhouse kick, therefore if you're a Mantis practitioner, you should never ever do a roundhouse kick. Whereas, I mean, in reality, like, when things are happening, just do whatever works. Like, if the situation arises where a roundhouse kick is going to be the best kick to use, does it matter if it's in your forms or not, you know? Or, like, people say, you know, Wing Chun doesn't have hook punches. Well, you're in a certain situation, you're a Wing Chun practitioner, and then your hand just happens to be there, their face is there. Why not just going for the hook? Like, do you really need to kind of like dogmatically adhere to then bringing your hand all the way down to then come in with your chain punches? Like, no, you know, we're trying to look for the underlying principles and not the superficial image of the style. So I think that's kind of, for me, is maybe the big one. Abs the Bomber, which is a great name, has asked me, what's your favourite style that you've tried and why? I feel like I'm just going to have to say Taiji Mantis, only because it's the style that I've gone deepest with. I mean, it's my main system, it's my kind of bread and butter of all my practice, and anything else that I do, whether it's BJJ or Muay Thai or Calis Illustrissimo or kind of dabbling with other Kung Fu styles, it's always really been about supplementing my Taiji Mantis or getting a different perspective on things in my Taiji Mantis or things that my Taiji Mantis doesn't have. So I would say it's my favourite style, and that's not because I think it's better than anything else, it's just because it's something that I've become so immersed in. I mean, I was living in its birthplace, training with one of the top masters, you know, learning like the local language, you know, getting familiar with the local dialect and the colloquialisms that the masters of the art use that are unique to that area, the way of life of the people that practice it. It's only because of my full immersion into it, I think that it is my favourite style, just because I guess I've invested so much into it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I guess it's a bit of a difficult one. Il Kalampi has asked me, what internal solo exercises would be good for body-to-body wrestling? Maybe you have some experience in BJJ. You know, actually, I'm going to tie this back into the question about like biggest misconception as well. I think one kind of misconception that I also see with Chinese martial arts is people thinking there's like a kind of some kind of special exercise, some kind of special drill, or some kind of secret key that's going to unlock like the power or the skill in your martial arts. Whereas honestly, like it's kind of cliche, but the secret really is just good basics. And what I've found helped me with grappling, in particular like the stand-up aspect of BJJ, it's just my Kung Fu basics. Like, having done a lot of stance training, you know, I've got a very strong root. It's very hard for people to take me down. If they don't get my balance off, then, you know, it's pretty hard to sweep out my legs because I'm very rooted. And it is quite hard to move me around as well. And also like the sensitivity that's come from like push hands and sticky hands and things, it enables me to, you know, to redirect force a lot quite well. And also for clinching and things, I've got kind of quite good structure, I would say, so that I've got quite a strong clinch. And also, yeah, quite hard for people to break my posture. Not saying I'm like a Superman or anything, but just, I would say, relative to people, relative to other people that are practicing BJJ, I think that I do have those attributes, and I put it down to my previous practice. But it's not down to anything in particular, it really is just down to like a long time of training, doing basics, doing stances, doing forms, doing push hands and sticky hands and different kinds of drills. I think all of that kind of has come together, and it's definitely helped and crossed over there. So hopefully that answers your question, even if it's not quite what you were hoping I was going to say. Okay, and moving on to Facebook, Ralph Gleason has asked, what was the biggest adjustment when you first moved to China? I think knowing... It's quite a hard one. I think I was quite young. I was 18. I was kind of wide-eyed and excited to see the world. So like nothing was really difficult for me. I feel like now I'm in my 30s, I'm quite a lot more set in my ways and a bit more stubborn. It can be more difficult. I'd probably have a harder time adjusting now than I did back then. But I think one of the hard things was, I think one of the hard things in the beginning was like always being stared at and being the center of attention. And that, I wouldn't say that it was just in the beginning, it was something that was gradually always there in the background. And when I was living in Shandong, it was really quite bad. It wasn't for, like when I moved to Shanghai, it was fine. Like Shanghai's a very international city. People are so used to foreigners, they don't really care. It's very cosmopolitan. There's people from all over the world living in Shanghai. But living in Shandong, which is quite a lot more conservative and closed off, and not, especially in Yantai, there wasn't many foreigners at all. So it was like, you know, every time you go to the supermarket, you've got people following you around, trying to look in your trolley, and then like not knowing that you speak Chinese, and then commenting like, oh yeah, look at the foreigner, look what he's buying, and you know, discussing what you're buying. Or like you get on the bus and someone always comes and sits next to you and just stares in your face. People taking photos of you in the street all the time. Like, I guess in the beginning it's kind of a novelty and you think it's kind of funny. But when it becomes like your daily life and you're just trying to go around and get by, like it can get quite exhausting and really overwhelming. And there was definitely stages where like I just didn't want to go out. Like I'd have to really convince myself and push myself just to go out to the supermarket because I just got to, face all these people, especially as an introvert. So I guess that was one adjustment. Maybe. Hood Mulligan has asked, have you had any aha moments in training lately? What was the last time? This can be regarding a movement, an application, how to train or how to teach, whatever, something you think about differently than you used to. Yeah, that's a really good one. I think for me, the big thing recently is I'm obsessing over basics. It's suddenly become, you always hear that cliche of, like I said before, the secret is just basics done well, but I'm really starting to deeply feel that from inside now. Like, it's not just something that I hear other people saying and kind of, oh, okay, yeah. It's something that now I'm really like the light bulb's gone off in my head and I'm like, yes, I get it. I know why the basics are so important. And so I'm kind of only really practicing like the most basic stuff in my Taiji Mantis. And I'm going really, really deep down a rabbit hole of just simple basics. And the last one is kind of 3 questions here from Tony Demmer. First one, I've read an article recently that described how the Taiji Chuan origin stories of Zhang Sanfeng, Chen Wangting have some political significance. But some may say that these origin stories are deeply related to the Chinese Confucian relationship to lineage, or that legendary origin stories are an integral part of Chinese culture that should not necessarily be overridden with concerns of objectivity. Do you agree with this? And if so, how does it affect the way you engage with people in the martial community? Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. It's something I definitely try and explore through my videos a lot. It's like, we shouldn't, like I've done videos saying this, I don't think the Southern Shaolin Temple was real, or I've, kind of debunked some, myths about the origins of my own system. Mantis, I've talked about some of the folklore surrounding all these styles in the south of China coming from the Southern Shaolin Temple, things like that. I don't think, though, it means that we should just kind of shrug off this folklore as irrelevant. Like, it's a very, stories are important to the people that are telling them, and it tells you a lot about the mindset of these people. Like if we look at Southern Chinese martial arts, the Southern Shaolin myth was very, very important to them. Whether it was objectively true, honestly, does it really matter? Like, it's interesting for us that are into history and that sort of stuff to kind of look into it and delve and find the real origins. But at the same time, these myths and stories can tell us like how these people thought. Obviously they had a resentment against the Qing dynasty. They felt as Han people second-class citizens compared to the Manchu that were ruling. They obviously it was a big thing, and that's why they put all of these stories in their styles. Like, it wasn't just coincidence, you know. There was a big reason when people were sitting down and you know, telling their students the myth of where their style comes from. And I think, you know, the pre-modern world was very much more focused on myth and storytelling as a way of conveying like wisdom and experience and meaning. You know, we look at like Greek mythology, Chinese mythology, like all different kinds of, you know, Nordic mythology. They all have these great stories that tell us so much about the human condition. Tell us about the human psyche and tell us about like the flaws, you know, and the strengths of people. So I still think it's great to look at these stories and delve into them. But I also think living in the modern world, like, we should also be kind of, I don't want to say skeptical, but like we shouldn't be naive and gullible. And I don't think we should just be like, oh, well, Sifu says this story, therefore it must be true. I'm practicing something that's 2,000 years old from, you know, an ancient monk that came from India or whatever. Like, you know, we do need to kind of have our heads screwed on our shoulders and be a bit more like, you know, realistic in that, I think. But as I say, the stories are nice to know, and they're enriching and they're fun, I think. The second one is, could you talk more about the earliest record of bare-handed systems? What is the difference between evidence between the Ming and Qing? How may the destruction of records during the Qing affect this? Yeah, I mean, honestly, we don't know too much about empty-hand Chinese martial arts prior to the Qing dynasty. I think most of what we're practicing now really is sort of a result of the last 200 years maximum. I think anything before that is kind of getting into the realm of speculation. I mean, I know there's like Qi Ji Guang's manual that's got the 32 postures, but he doesn't talk too much about them in detail, really. And he himself said that he didn't think empty hand stuff was that important. Like, it was just kind of almost a footnote, something on the end of his manual that was like, oh, well, by the way, this is good for the troops to train some basic coordination stuff. So I think, yeah, like a lot of the stuff wasn't really recorded that well, because the people that were doing most of the record keeping in ancient China were government officials, you know, people part of the imperial like ruling system, and they didn't really regard folk culture, you know, civilian culture very highly. So they didn't see a whole lot of benefit in recording a lot of this stuff in that much detail, which means that kind of all we've really got to go for the most part is oral history, which, as I've just said, is kind of vague and is not always historically accurate. But, you know, we do have some oral history of styles, like particularly around the Dongfeng area, styles relating to Shaolin that go back to the early Ming dynasty. How accurate that is, I don't know, but the stories are there. And how much of what those systems are, for example, like, you know, Da Hong Quan, like, just because we're doing something today called Da Hong Quan doesn't mean it had any similarity or relevance to something called Da Hong Quan 600-700 years ago, is also something we can never really know. So yeah, I don't get too hung up on that, although it is kind of interesting. And Tony's last question was, what do you make of the relationship between religion, theatre and martial arts? It seems some suggest that some martial arts originated as entertainment, diminishing their martial application, and yet the need for martial artists seems to be highly emphasised despite the use of guns during the Qing dynasty. Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. There's a guy out there who's got this kind of obsession with theatre, and I know he's got some pretty wacky ideas. I wouldn't take it too seriously. There's a lot of pseudo-academia in there that is just full-on wrong, honestly. But that said, I mean, for sure, like, there's definitely... theatre definitely impacted it because it is part of people's overall worldview. And when you look at the names of movements and forms, a lot of them are taking inspiration from plays and characters and things from theatre, because that was the popular culture, that was the main form of entertainment. It was an easy reference. You know, if I say, like, swing your sword as if you're Sun Wukong, right? And everyone in China at that time knew who Sun Wukong was. Like, straight away they'd think of, you know, a certain story, like, you know, stealing the peach from the orchard, monkey steals peach, right? People would get that reference straight away. They'd know the story, and so they'd know how to do that move. Like, I think if we were to create a martial arts system now, maybe we'd name moves in a form after, like, you know, like Marvel comic characters or something, you know, like Hulk smash, stuff like that. So there's definitely like an influence in that it was just a common reference for people, especially being illiterate. It was an easy kind of visual cue. There's a lot of stuff about how it was, a lot of kind of research into like how a lot of early martial arts systems were practiced by like theatre groups that would travel around the country, and then the martial arts was something that they would also do to protect themselves. Also, there was an aspect of like the performance martial arts that they do on stage, which would probably, I don't know, I'm being, you know, going into speculation here, but I feel like they would kind of play off each other, and the stuff they were performing on stage would probably influence the stuff they're using to defend themselves, and vice versa, just because, you know, habits of the way you move your body and things. I mean, definitely when we look at like long fist forms and things like that, there's a strong performative aspect. I think as well, like, you can look at, you know, temple festivals and things. Like nowadays you see, you know, lion dance performances and things are always done public holidays and things. That's something that's been going back hundreds of years in China. So you can definitely see like, you know, forms were also something that were designed for performance. And I think we shouldn't like naively say that forms are purely about combat application and every single move in there is designed the way it is purely for understanding application. There is also an element of you know, performance in the construction of forms to showcase your style to the wider community and say this is what we're about. I mean, even simple styles don't necessarily need to look flowery or fancy, but still they wanted to showcase to the public this is how we move, this is what we do, this is what we consider powerful, this is what we consider good movement. So there is a performative aspect in there too. Yeah, I'd say overall it's kind of a mix of all of them, like combat application, performance. It's so diverse as well, so it's kind of hard to kind of answer in a simplified way. But yeah, alright, I think that's about enough. I feel like I'm starting to ramble a bit now, but hopefully there was some interesting insights in there. Hopefully I answered your questions. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys and your continued support. I'm really looking forward to Okinawa, so if you can support and help with that, please do so. It would mean so much to me, and you know, I want to always give back more than I get, so I'm going to do the best I can to make this Okinawa series amazing. Yeah, and thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.